Okay, ready to dive into another thought-provoking deep dive?
Always.
All right, so get this. What if, like, every single person in India suddenly woke up with an upper-caste surname?
Whoa.
Total chaos, right? The confusion, the sheer audacity of it all. That's exactly what Pravina MR's article throws out there, like a massive social experiment.
It's pretty wild.
She basically says everyone, and I mean everyone, regardless of their actual background, just adopts a Sharma, an Iyer, or a Mukherjee, those names, often associated with privilege.
Yeah, those surnames carry a lot of weight.
Exactly. But would it actually, like, dismantle the caste system? Or would it just create a whole new set of problems, make things even worse?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Totally.
Yeah.
So let's unpack this. The article really digs into how much a surname actually matters in India.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just a family name, right? It's like an instant indicator of where you stand socially. It's woven right into the fabric of the caste system.
Like a built-in social code.
Yeah. And an upper caste surname can open doors, while unfortunately, those linked to certain lower castes can slam them shut.
It's crazy to think about how much power a name can hold. Pravina uses examples like Ramesh Shomar becoming Ramesh Sharma, or Sita Yadav suddenly becoming Sita Iyer.
Yeah, those are good examples.
Makes you wonder if that kind of mass name change would actually blur those caste lines, make it harder to tell who's who based just on a name.
It's a fascinating thought experiment. I mean, initially, maybe you'd see some blurring, that dilution of caste identity, like you said. But here's the thing.
What?
We're talking about these super deeply ingrained social structures. They've been around for centuries. And the article makes this really clever point. When the oldest signposts are removed, those determined to discriminate will simply find new markers.
Ah, so even if you change the names,
Exactly.
people would still find ways to figure out who belongs where.
Right. They might start digging into ancestry, looking at where someone's from, or even paying more attention to first names to pick up on those subtle caste clues.
So basically, instead of surnames, people might scrutinize, like, I don't know, birthplaces or even what your parents are named.
It's definitely possible. And then there's the question of how those in upper caste communities would react to this sudden flood of new Sharmas and Iyers.
Oh, right. Like, hey, wait a minute, that's Iyer Sharma, not yours.
Huh, exactly. The article suggests that they might feel like their identity, their exclusivity is under attack.
It's almost comical to imagine, right?
Kind of, but it gets at something deeper, that human need for hierarchy.
It makes you think.
But hold on, we also have to consider the practical side, the sheer chaos this could cause. Think about trying to actually update every record with all these new names.
Passports, land titles, voter rolls, millions upon millions of changes.
Exactly.
It'd be an absolute nightmare. Government offices drowning in paperwork, legal battles over inheritance and proving who you are.
And what about India's reservation system? The one designed to help those historically marginalized by the caste system.
Yeah, how would that even work if everyone suddenly has an upper caste surname?
Right. How do you determine who's actually eligible for those benefits? It could totally undermine the entire system, potentially leaving those who need it most without support.
It's like, trying to fix a broken leg with a Band-Aid. You're not really solving the problem, just kind of covering it up. The article makes a really good point here, saying that simply changing names is a superficial solution. It doesn't actually get to the root of the problem. Those deeply ingrained prejudices and the whole societal structure that keeps casteism going.
It's like putting a new coat of paint on a crumbling building. It might look better on the surface, but the foundation is still weak.
Right. It's about addressing the cause, not just the symptoms. But so then, what are the real solutions to something so deeply entrenched?
Well, that's where the article gets really interesting. It pushes past the what ifs and starts looking at some real, tangible things that could actually make a difference.
Okay, like what? Give us the good stuff.
All right, well, education and awareness seem like a solid starting point, right?
For sure. But how do we actually do that?
We need to go beyond just learning about the caste system in a textbook kind of way.
Yeah, make it real, make it relevant.
Exactly. We have to foster critical thinking about how prejudice actually plays out in everyday life. This could mean reforming school curriculums, launching public awareness campaigns, and promoting initiatives like those Annihilate Caste workshops. You familiar with those?
I've heard of them, yeah.
They're all about challenging people to confront their own biases, to really dig deep and examine those ingrained ways of thinking.
So it's not just about knowing the facts. It's about understanding how those facts translate into real-world actions and attitudes.
Exactly. And cultivating empathy, really understanding what other people are going through. But let's be real, awareness alone isn't enough. We need a strong legal framework too, right?
Totally. Laws with teeth, consequences for discrimination, and systems to hold institutions accountable when they allow those discriminatory practices to happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Enforcing those anti-discrimination laws, making sure there are real consequences for breaking them. And like you said, making sure institutions are held responsible for discriminatory practices within their walls.
What about specific examples?
The article mentions things like dedicated fast-track courts for cases specifically dealing with caste-based offenses.
That's interesting.
It's about sending a very clear message that this kind of behavior won't be tolerated.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But punishment is only one part of the equation, right? We need to empower those communities that have been marginalized for so long to break free from this cycle.
Absolutely. And that's where economic empowerment comes in. We're talking about things like providing vocational training, supporting entrepreneurship, and ensuring access to capital so people can build a future for themselves.
It's about creating opportunities, not just relying on reservations or handouts.
Right. Leveling the playing field.
So education, laws, economic opportunities, those are all really important pieces of the puzzle. But what about social integration? How do we actually get people from different backgrounds to connect, to see each other as human beings rather than just labels?
That's the tough one, isn't it? It's about dismantling those barriers that keep people separate and encouraging genuine interaction between different caste groups.
Easier said than done.
Definitely. But there are some interesting ideas out there. The article mentions intercaste social events, community projects, and even, get this, intercaste marriages.
Whoa, that's pretty radical.
It is. And some government initiatives are actually incentivizing them, trying to encourage those kinds of unions.
That's fascinating. It's like trying to shift the whole social fabric from the inside out.
Exactly. And it gets at this really powerful quote from the article that really stuck with me. True equality is achieved not by erasing our differences, but by embracing them without prejudice.
Such a profound statement. It really challenges us to think about what a truly equitable society would look like. A place where our differences are celebrated, not used against us. But before we dive too deep into that, I want to go back for a sec. The article had some really witty insights sprinkled throughout those little bits of humor that, make you laugh, but also make you think.
Oh, yeah, it was full of them. What was your favorite?
This is one that just cracked me up. If everyone is a Sharma or Iyer, soon the tea vendor will ask, yes, but what kind of Sharma are you really? It's so funny, but also so true.
I love that one. It perfectly captures that human need to find ways to categorize and differentiate, even when those distinctions are, at the end of the day, totally meaningless.
It's like we just can't help ourselves, can we? We're always looking for ways to create those us versus them categories. But it shows that simply changing a label doesn't change the mindset. It's like that other analogy from the article, the one about switching surnames being like painting over cracks in a wall.
Oh, yeah, that's a powerful one. The structure's still fragile no matter how good it looks on the surface.
Exactly. We can't just cover up these deeply rooted problems. We have to address the foundation, the very structure upon which those prejudices are built. So where does that leave us?
Well, it brings us back to the need for a multi-pronged approach. Education, legal frameworks, economic empowerment, social integration, all these things have to work together to create real, lasting change.
It's a long game, not a quick fix.
Right.
But I think the more we learn, the more we challenge our own biases, the closer we get to a world where a name is just a name, not a marker of destiny or a tool for discrimination. And I think that's a future worth fighting for.
Absolutely. A future where what matters is who you are, not what your name is. And I think the article's closing line sums it perfectly.
Let's hear it.
Let's aspire to a society where the content of one's character outshines the surname they carry.
Beautifully put. So as we move into the next part of this deep dive, I want to leave you with this. We've been talking about these external markers, these labels that divide us. But even if we could somehow magically erase all of them, would we truly be equal? What are those deeper, more subtle markers of inequality that might still be lurking beneath the surface?
It really makes you think about what true equality actually means. Like, are we just defined by these external labels, or is there something deeper that connects us as human beings?
Because if it's all about how things look, then we're always going to find new ways to divide ourselves, right? So what are those deeper things, those hidden markers of inequality that stick around even if we could magically erase surnames and caste?
That's where things get really interesting. The article focuses on surnames in India, but it made me think about other things that can reveal a lot about someone's background.
Like what?
Things like accents, how someone dresses, even what kind of music they like. Stuff we might not even realize we're noticing.
It's like our brains are wired to categorize people based on these tiny little details.
Right. And the crazy thing is, those assumptions we make, they can have real consequences in the real world.
Totally. Like, think about how someone's accent might, without anyone even meaning to, affect whether they get a job, or how the way someone's dressed might change how they're treated by, like, the police.
It's almost like these invisible lines get drawn in society based on things that shouldn't matter.
And the worst part is, those biases, they're not always conscious, right?
Right. It's not always outright discrimination. A lot of times it's these deep-seated prejudices, stuff we've inherited from our culture, how we were raised.
That unconscious bias is so hard to fight because we don't even know it's there half the time. It takes real effort to look at our own assumptions, to really question those ingrained ways of thinking.
And that's why having these conversations is so important. We need to drag those hidden biases out into the open, make people aware of them.
It's not about blaming anyone, it's about understanding and self-reflection.
Exactly. It's like shining a light on those blind spots we all have.
Because in the end, true equality isn't just about changing the laws.
It's about changing hearts and minds, right?
Totally. It's about recognizing those little ways we might be contributing to inequality, even without meaning to, and working to dismantle those ingrained prejudices.
Creating a society where we judge each other based on who we are on the inside, not the sound of our voice or how we dress or any of those superficial things.
That's the dream, right? But it's a tough one to achieve. So, for everyone listening, I'm curious, what are some of those subtle social markers that you've noticed? Those things that seem harmless, but might actually be perpetuating inequality?
Share your thoughts with us on social media. Let's keep this conversation going. It's way too important to just end here.
Okay, so we've talked about the hypothetical scenario, the potential problems, and the need for real, deep change. But before we wrap up, I want to circle back to one of the main points in the article, the danger of superficial solutions.
Yeah, Pravina really hammers home the idea that real change needs a holistic approach. We can't just treat the symptoms, we got to get to the root of the problem.
And she points out how even well-intentioned efforts, like this whole surname switch idea, can backfire if they're not thought through carefully enough.
It's a good reminder that complex problems need nuanced solutions. Those quick fixes rarely work, and they can even make things worse sometimes.
It's like that saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. We have to be aware of the potential consequences of our actions, even when we're trying to do the right thing.
And that's where critical thinking is so important. We need to analyze these complicated issues from all angles, weigh the pros and cons, and make sure our solutions are actually addressing the underlying causes.
Not just slapping a Band-Aid on a gaping wound.
Exactly. It's about digging deeper, having those tough conversations that challenge us to think differently about how we can create a fairer and more just world.
So as we move into the last part of this deep dive, I want to leave you with a challenge.
Yeah.
How do we move beyond those superficial solutions and really grapple with the complexity of these issues?
What concrete steps can we take as individuals and as a society to address those hidden markers of inequality that stick around even when the obvious ones are gone?
What does it actually mean to build a world where everyone is valued and respected, regardless of their background or any other label we try to stick on them?
These are big questions, but they're the ones we need to be asking ourselves, because the answers will shape the future we build. A future where equality isn't just a dream, but a reality.
It's like we've been peeling back layers of an onion, right? Uncovering all these hidden complexities underneath what we see on the surface.
It's been a real deep dive.
We've talked about those subtle social cues, how much weight a name can carry, and how we need solutions that go way deeper than just fixing what's obvious. But before we wrap up our look at Pravina's article, I want to touch on something she brings up that really hit home for me. That even if we could magically erase caste, there's a chance new types of hierarchies would just pop up.
That's such a crucial point, and I feel like it often gets missed in these conversations. Even if we could totally wipe out caste as a reason for discrimination, humans, we just have this instinct to create hierarchies. It's almost like we can't help ourselves.
It's like that saying, nature abhors a vacuum, right? Get rid of one system and something else will rush in to fill the gap.
Exactly. So what could those new systems look like in a world without caste? Pravina suggests that maybe class, religion, or even political beliefs could become the new dividing lines. Or maybe we'd see totally new kinds of discrimination based on stuff we haven't even thought of yet.
That's a bit of a sobering thought, isn't it? Like, no matter what we do, we're always up against this human tendency to create those us versus them categories.
Yeah, it highlights why we need to stay vigilant.
Hmm.
Even while we're working to dismantle the systems of oppression that exist right now, we have to be on the lookout for new ones popping up. It's this ongoing process, constantly pushing towards a more just and equal world.
It makes you realize this isn't a one and done kind of deal.
Absolutely.
And this brings us right back to what Pravina was saying all along. We can't just treat the symptoms.
Got to get to the root cause.
We can change labels, tweak the system, but if we don't actually change how we think, how we see the world, it's all just window dressing.
Like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic.
Exactly. So how do we change those deep down values, those beliefs that lead to inequality? It feels like such a huge task.
It's about more than just policies and laws.
Right. It has to be deeper than that.
It's about changing how we relate to each other, how we see each other's worth. It's about nurturing things like empathy and compassion, really respecting the fact that every single person has dignity and value.
And that has to start with each of us looking in the mirror, right? Examining our own biases, challenging our own prejudices, and really committing to building a world where everyone feels seen and valued for who they are.
It's a journey, not a quick fix.
And it's not always easy.
No, but it's so worth it.
Pravina ends her article with a line that really stuck with me. Let's aspire to a society where the content of one's character outshines the surname they carry.
That's beautiful. It's a powerful reminder that true worth isn't about those external labels, It's about what makes us human. Kindness, courage, our ability to love and understand each other.
So to wrap things up, I want to leave our listeners with a challenge. Look past the surface stuff. Question those assumptions we all make, and embrace the hard work of creating a truly equal world. Because it starts with each of us. It starts with recognizing our own biases, pushing back against the status quo, and fighting for a world where everyone has the chance to shine no matter where they come from, what they believe, or any label anyone tries to put on them.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep asking those tough questions, keep learning, and keep pushing for a better future. We'll see you next time.